Okay, I'll go ahead and start with just a little bit of housekeeping that will get that taken care of and buy us a couple more minutes as people continue to arrive. Um, and just to let everybody know and also answer a question that was in the chat box, we are recording this session. So it will be available to you to review later or to share with others, as are all of our sessions. And we'll send a link out to that in the follow-up email, so you can check back. And also know that anything that you share on the webinar today will be available in that recording. So that's your word to the wise. This is the Ring Central platform. If you've never been on this one of the many, welcome. The controls are pretty similar. You should have a control box probably at the bottom of your screen. If not, it might have gone up and hidden in the top. There's a chat box that everybody's encouraged to use, and our speakers have shared some presentations that I'll be sharing on the screen, such as you can see today. So with that, I just want to welcome everybody to Thursday afternoon. I'm sure you've been working hard all week. When I said that, I just had a little breath out and realized I was scrunching my shoulders up. So invite everyone to take a breath. Oh, relax the body. Yeah, wiggle around a little bit. If you stand up or whatever you need to do to take care of yourselves. And we do have video available to everyone and welcome you to use it, but also welcome you to walk around, stand up, whatever you need to do to be good to yourselves, drink water. And really just recognizing that we're talking about some pretty serious topics, and we're talking about some pretty serious solutions. So remembering to recognize the breath and the body as holding a lot of that stress and tension from today and from memories past of our own and of our ancestors. And so just really be caring for ourselves and others. So with that, I want to hand it over to our President and CEO, Debbie McKeon, to offer some opening remarks, and then we will proceed to hear from our fabulous speakers today. Thanks, Debbie.
Thanks so much, Megan. And Megan, I so appreciate that you always start us off in such a way where I feel like I'm as well prepared as possible for the conversation ahead, both mentally and physically. So just appreciate that very much. Good afternoon, San Diego Grantmaker community members and colleagues. It's really a pleasure to be with you here today. I think this is another of our weekly funder and community updates in which we're continuing to talk about how this massive shift in our society is really creating changes in how we work and how we live. And some of it is like playing itself out right here, right now, as we all see that, all day long we deal with our mute buttons that, we can't get off mute, and video that does or doesn't work, or some other freezing frame that happens, or someone walks by that didn't really think they were going to be in a video. And, and like we're all getting used to that. And yet all of us who are doing that are really the lucky ones and who have it easy because that we are connected. And we are able to utilize the virtual tools and techniques that bring us together to do our work. And so today we're really talking about the fact that not every household and every person has reliable internet and the right hardware, or that maybe they don't have enough of it. And so as our schools, from kindergarten through our universities, move to online settings and how to really be the best education creators and providers, our focus today is really to talk about how education is adapting, the challenges it's facing, and what remains to be done. So I'm really delighted that we're going to talk about not only what's happening today, what's in the short term for how we're preparing, but also then some long-term systemic opportunities that we're looking to act on. Because we know our student population, many of them are challenged with job readiness, income gaps, their abilities to really access the education and the opportunities that they desire, and to have the equitable growth for themselves and for their communities. So I'm really enthusiastic about today's conversation because it really helps to continue with what I'm seeing as a theme in these calls and how people are coming together, is that we're talking about building better, not rebuilding. And so we're talking about how we take the lessons that we're learning from this crisis and utilize them, in this case today, to benefit all of our student population equitably in the future. So with that, I'm delighted to turn it back to Megan to really start our program. And thank you to all of our speakers. Really appreciate you being here to share your thoughts.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you for setting that context. We know that connectivity and hardware are not the only answers, and education is not the only thing our schools are providing. So we're really fortunate to have this varied group of folks with us to talk about all of those things. But really, we recognize that there are many other aspects of the digital divide or digital disparities. We don't have anybody here to talk about telehealth. We don't have quite a multitude of perspectives because we live in such a connected world now. But we wanted to dive deep on this issue of education because it is so very important and so very front of mind for many people. And we're happy to welcome, and we'll go through each of our 4 speakers is going to spend a little bit of time sharing from their perspective. Oh, and I even have a slide on this. And then we will get into a Q&A, an opportunity for discussion, and we really want to hear from the folks on the line with us about what you're up to, what questions or concerns you have, what solutions you're seeing out in the community, and then we'll wrap up. So with that, I just want to share with you the names and where the folks are coming from, whose faces you see. We have Patrick Giddis-Bungle, I almost did it, Giddis-Bungle, Dr. Giddis-Bungle from the San Diego County Office of Ed, Cherie Pierre from Computers to Kids San Diego, Paula Zamudio from Cox Communications, and Sarah Jacobs from San Diego for Every Child. So to open us up, we're really happy to have Patrick share a little bit of that big picture context that the County Office of Ed has. And I want to just note that we're really pleased to have you here because the County Office of Ed is really looking after many of the students in our region who are facing extra challenges to their education. And so your perspective is going to really help us hone in on who most needs our assistance at this time. So with that, I will switch over to your PowerPoint, and please go ahead and take it away.
Cool. So Megan and Debbie and everyone, just thank you again for having me and San Diego County Office of Ed on this panel. Really good afternoon. Hope everyone's doing well. I guess I wanted to start by, I guess I have the COVID-19 haircut, just so you guys know. So I apologize for that. I am the Assistant Superintendent for Innovation for San Diego County Office of Ed. And I know that Terry Loftus, who is our Assistant Sup for and CTO, was unfortunately not able to be here this afternoon. So I am filling in for him and filling in for those big shoes. To give everyone a little bit of context about STCOE and what we do, have you already advanced to the next slide? Yep. We serve and we support 42 school districts in the region. We actually support the most vulnerable students. We support school leaders, teachers, and students across the county. We have nearly 780 schools and more than 500,000 students, including about 3,000 children that we educate each year through our juvenile court community schools. We provide a variety of services for our 42 school districts, 125 charters, and our 5 community colleges. Next slide. Our employees, we collaborate with school, industry, community leaders to really address countywide educational issues. We organize and facilitate a lot of professional learning and opportunities. We provide the financial oversight for school districts. We develop countywide technology initiatives. We really support our teachers and administrators as they earn and register credentials. We coordinate a lot of regional services for our special populations of students. And then we support our school districts with their local control accountability plans as well. If you don't know, San Diego County actually processes about 66,000 paychecks monthly for our school employees throughout the county. We also provide a lot of internet connectivity to our school districts. And we coordinate all the countywide student safety and emergency prep programs across. We also complete a lot of background checks and fingerprinting for school employees throughout the districts. And then we also have an outdoor ed program that we operate. Next slide. So I would be remiss if I did not include current status of our devices and connectivity. We actually provide multiple forms of support for school districts and charters. We really, because of economies of scale, we work with a lot of districts and charters to determine specific needs. We coordinate a lot of donations and deliveries. Thank you to, a lot of the folks from J-Labs who donate the headsets, as well as, computers to SE Kids as well, and San Diego Foundation, and as well as San Diego Grantmakers. We also provide ongoing communication to technical and ed tech leaders, legislative updates, legal advice around distance learning. We also provide recommendations, guidelines, and technical support to districts, including Zoom and many other video conferencing platforms that some of you who have kids are experiencing on a daily basis now. We also do legislative outreach, advocacy, formal letters and emails that we send to the U.S. Department of Ed to really lobby for additional connectivity as well as devices. We also provide guidance on devices, hotspots, Chromebooks, and then we're one of the 5 statewide locations that were identified for delivery and coordination of the donations that Google and T-Mobile announced recently. Next slide. If you're not familiar with, if you have kids, they were put into distance learning. That's kind of the buzzword along with social distancing, right? So distance learning, we've defined that, and the California Department of Education has defined that as really instruction when the student and the instructor are in different locations. So the way we've responded is we've developed a distance learning planning tool to support our districts. We've developed and curated quite a bit of lessons and training materials by content area, which is all accessible through our website. I do want to mention that teaching and learning does not have to be exclusively online. We definitely provide guidance around non-tech options as well, print, booklets. We really want to focus on the needs of our most vulnerable students. We've provided a lot of guidance around grading policies to make sure that students are held harmless around those practices. We also recognize that we need to provide social emotional support as well to make sure that goes along with the academics. And sometimes when distance learning, you're happening to do this remotely, sometimes you can't really capture all the social emotional needs of our kids. And then food, shelter, health and childcare is something that we also are providing guidance in. And we've been providing as much communication and support to parents and families as possible and working with our districts and our charters to do that. If I can go to the next slide. So I will tell you that we do recognize that, there are many risks and challenges that our families have already and will eventually have to face and deal with when it comes to this pandemic. So we're trying our best to really focus on all of these, right? While we know that for the purposes of today's discussion is really around digital connectivity, which we really believe, again, are all equally important when it comes to student needs. Next slide. So, we also received a recent report from USC's Annenberg Research Network. They estimate that at the entire state, 1 in 4 K-12 households in California actually does not have a desktop or a laptop computer and high-speed internet connection. And at statewide, that represents about 870,000 families whose child or children are likely to kind of fall behind in that attainment. So, we actually have a foundation based out of the county office. And I know that, we have partners here who are going to be on this panel as well, and we really appreciate that. But we're trying to address that digital connectivity and equity gap. Based on the data that the foundation has gathered, we estimate that approximately 100,000 students lack connectivity or they're underconnected. And when I mean underconnected, they really lack some of the bandwidth capabilities. When you have a family of 4, sometimes the bandwidth needs aren't as met. So I will tell you that our Classroom of the Future Foundation is really focused on 4 areas, one being devices and hotspots. Second area is really providing support and resources for offline materials, as well as workbooks and packets. And then the third area is trying to figure out how we can subsidize or provide at least free broadband for our qualifying students with increased bandwidth. And then the last is making sure that we try to expand access to our rural, remote reservations, just to make sure that we have long-term stability and sustainability. So that being said, I just, again, thank you for the opportunity to share with you, the status of what we're doing around, distance learning and the digital divide in education.
Thank you so much, and hopefully that offers a little bit of context for everybody who's with us here today. Please don't hesitate to use that chat box as we go along to record questions you might have, and we'll pause in the middle if it makes sense, or we'll kind of lump them all into the end to get that big picture, holistic response. But thank you so much, Patrick. And now we're happy to turn the mic, the virtual mic, on over to Cherie to talk a little bit about the hardware needs. When you are immediately thrust into an environment in which you're not in the classroom with your teacher, how do you get the information, the education there if you don't have a computer? Or I think it's important to note, we've mentioned a few times today, not having enough of something, not having enough bandwidth. Imagine a family with 3 children and all of them are supposed to be in school at the same time. So Cherie, go ahead and unmute yourself, and I will switch over to the slide deck that you provided, and we will go from there.
Perfect. So while she's getting the slide up, for most of you who don't know, I'm Cherie Pierre. I'm CEO of Computers to Kids. We're a nonprofit here in San Diego that's been around since 2004. And our whole mission is to help bridge the digital divide. And that's by getting computer devices directly into the homes of low-income families. You can go ahead and switch the slides. So our mission is, we believe that all families, regardless of their economic status, need to be equally connected to technology. That is not only a computer, but also internet connection in partnership with Cox, which you'll hear from later on. We are seeing, as a result of COVID-19, a lot of middle-class families now are realizing they don't have the adequate devices at home for their kids to study at school. So our demographics of who we normally see come into our program has expanded considerably. Next slide. So our whole purpose is a technology assistance program. That's what we do. We provide technology. We take unwanted electronics from the community. Those are computers from corporations, individuals, electronic drives. We completely sanitize them, put all new office software on them, educational software, and then work with the San Diego County of Education, the different schools, any community nonprofit in the community at all. We will work with them to be able to identify who of their clients don't have a computer at home, and we will be able to get them that system. In addition to the system, because it is a refurbished system, we have gone an extra step, and we provide 1 year free technical support. That means if anything goes wrong with that system, hardware, software, they drop it, run over it, which I've seen, we then either fix the system, or if we can't fix it, we will replace it. We are not only a nonprofit that deals with education and STEM in children, but we're also an environmental nonprofit, because we do take in approximately 600 to 700,000 pounds of electronics every year. We end up ultimately only recycling about 179,000 pounds. And that's because we believe reuse is the new recycle, and we try to make sure that every piece of equipment that we get in, their life is extended. Not only do we do that, but we also offer an opportunity for schools and students that are going into the IT field to do on-the-job training, so they're able to learn technical skills while they're studying as well. Next slide. So what's very interesting is, for those of us who've been doing this, we knew there was digital inequity. It was always hard to convince others that it exists. But unfortunately, due to COVID-19, we're realizing that there are millions of students in the United States that now do not have access to homeschooling. Since the schools closed on March 16th, C2K has received more than 6,200 applications from individuals requesting a computer, and we've been contacted by 5 of the universities to see how we could provide bulk volume of computers for their students. Next slide. So as many of you heard in April, the state superintendent, Tony Thurmond, announced a task force to close the digital divide. Computers to Kids was really fortunate. We were in Sacramento in February before this happened, already speaking to members of the state to find out how we can take those computers from the state level and the state agencies and put them back into the communities. You know, now that digital divide is a big hot topic, people don't really notice that there are about 4 or 5 nonprofit refurbishers in the state of California who have been actively trying to solve this problem for years. And C2K alone has impacted over 435,000 children and their families with devices. That's a lot for a nonprofit. We do it very economically. We only have a 6% fundraising and management costs because we really try to make sure that every penny that we receive goes back into the refurbishing and preparing of technology for the community. To do that, we rely on partnerships. And those partnerships are like Cox Communication, providing the internet. One of the things that C2K was very fortunate about is we were contacted by the San Diego County of Education back in 2012 and asked to come to King Chavez Elementary School to help with the distribution with Cox. And immediately Cox and C2K realized that, okay, this is definitely a game changer having both of us at the table. And over the years, we have created all the tools necessary to ensure that we overcome any excuse a low-income family may have to get a computer. And that's really important because 50% of all low-income family households are without access to a technology device, whether it be a computer, desktop, laptop. They may have a cell phone, but that doesn't do much good if you're trying to do homework. And so what we do is normally we will go out into a school and we will work with the school surrounding. Maybe we'll have a host school and 4 or 5 other schools in the same neighborhood that will send their students to us, and we can distribute anywhere up to 200 computers in an hour and a half by doing almost the families walk up, we sign them up, they go over to the Cox table, they get their internet, and then they go out and they either drive up to the truck and get the computer loaded into their car, or they have a stroller and we load it into the stroller. We're now having to kind of change our view of distributing out into the community. C2K has created a drive-through out of the back of the warehouse, so families will sign up on their phone, they'll be able to fill out the application, they'll get a text letting them know where we are and directions on how to get to us. And then when they drive around the back, we have staff that is fully prepared in PPE gear, and they're helping load the computers directly into the individual's car. They're never getting out of their vehicle. They're staying safely in their car, and we're being able to deliver that to them. One of the challenges that we're facing right now, of course, is the fact that with all the companies closed, there's little technology being donated to us. Fortunately enough for Computers to Kids, we received close to 22,000 portable laptop devices, 2-in-1 laptops on the very end of December and the 1st of January. So our staff has been busy refurbishing those computers and getting them into the homes as soon as we can. As a matter of fact, 3 days after the schools closed, Computers to Kids hired 14 more IT technicians just to help us be able to turn the equipment over fast enough to ensure that we can get it out into the community. We believe that every student should have a computer in their home, but the answer should not just be buying new systems and giving them to the students. It should be working as a state, as a community, as a city as a whole, giving incentives to companies who will donate their electronics to nonprofits such as C2K, ensuring that we're able to refurbish them and get them working with the County Office of Education, working with the schools, working with nonprofits, identifying those families and getting the computers into their hands. That is our goal.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It's I think so many folks in our community have really amped up their operations chops in the last few months, just being able to figure out how to develop new ways to design supply chains and distribution. And it sounds like you are one of those. And I believe you mentioned there are 4 or 5 refurbishers in the state. Is that right? And we have 2 here in San Diego.
Correct. And 4 of us actually went up to Sacramento and worked together. So it's Computers to Kids and then the San Diego Futures Foundation here in San Diego. We have a strong relationship over the years and have learned to be able to work. Futures Foundation really targets the elderly and more training, and Computers to Kids focuses on getting the devices out to everyone.
Great. Thank you so much. Well, none of this would happen. We would all have a bunch of fancy paperweights if it weren't for the actual connectivity, the wires and waves out there. And we're fortunate to have San Diego Grantmakers member Cox Communications with us here today, and Paula to talk a little bit about that partnership and about sort of how the programs that they have really they've really been able to double down on those to make sure that our region can have adequate connectivity. Thank you for being here, Paula.
Thank you, Megan, and my apologies that I do not have a deck, so hopefully that will be interesting enough here for a couple minutes. I wanted to start before talking about our program with a few statistics that we have, and I will start by saying that this is from summer of 2018, so not like last summer, but I think it's still relevant and worth mentioning, especially because they are pretty in line with some of the stats that Patrick and both Cherie gave. So we did a nationwide survey in all of our footprint and found that 1 in 3 households with children ages 6 to 17 do not have high-speed internet connection at home. So that's, those numbers, they just seem so big to me. I know that, you know, I think about like, oh, I can't imagine anyone at my child's preschool, for example, not having internet. So it's just a big number and something to keep in mind kind of as we're having this conversation. Another statistic that we found, 25% of teens are often unable to complete their homework assignments due to unreliable computer internet access. Again, given this topic, I don't think that's a huge surprise to anyone. But some of the, like on the flip side, the vast majority of parents that were surveyed said that, you know, having internet gives their child a leg up for high school graduation, more than 90%, of course. Helps their students get higher grades, more than 90%. Helps children be more interested in schoolwork, 88%. Makes it easier for parents to communicate with teachers in schools, 95%. So I think what is sort of a big for me when I see these numbers is that, yes, you need, if you are a student, you need to have internet. And if you do not have it, it is a big deal. And I mean, really is what this digital divide and everything that we're working, you know, towards and helping to bridge this digital divide. So I'll get off my soapbox there for a second. But at Cox, we have our program, like Cherie said, it started here in California in 2012. Highlighted in Santa Barbara, really took off in San Diego. We offer internet for low-income families for $9.95 a month. That's what it was in 2012. That's what it still is now. That includes a Wi-Fi modem. That includes no annual contracts, free installation, access to Wi-Fi hotspots. So that's our product offering. We've been kind of banging this drum, I like to say, for several years now, working really closely with Computers to Kids, working really closely with various school districts throughout the county to do these connection events, to connect students. And unfortunately, the situation that we're now in, it's really put this front and center. So we've been out there sort of trying to get people connected, and now it's just the need has skyrocketed, and we have seen that as well in the last 6 weeks at Cox. We, like I said, started in 2012. We were never mandated to do it. It's sort of something that we're still family owned, so something the family believes really strongly in. James Cox, our founder, he was a teacher, so that's something that's still really important to the family. And I think also to Cherie's point, you know, over the years, we've sort of had this really good system And because we are so entrenched in the community, we've been able to make upgrades and sort of change and pivot based on different things. A perfect example, which had I not been, even myself at events, talking to families and trying to get families connected, a lot of families were saying, hey, I rent a room at someone's house, but I need my own internet connection. So, because, the person who lives in the house won't let me use their internet. So we were able to implement what we call a roommate account, because we know that rents are so high in California. And that's something that, again, now is national, but really came out of California, driving like this need of, hey, the community needs this, because there are, 2, 3, 4 families living in one house, and they all need access, right? The other piece I think that I wanted to be sure to mention, because it is because of the fact that we have been working on this effort and had these systems in place and these great partnerships with, Computers to Kids, is being able to pivot because of COVID-19. So Cox, like the other providers, raised their hand and signed the FCC pledge, but we also were able to implement some new things because of COVID-19. So we are giving free service to families who sign up by May 15th until July 15th. So our thought process on that was, at first it was 60 days free, but then a lot of input from school districts saying, hey, we need to extend this. So thinking, okay, let's get these families through the school year, for now. To the point, Patrick raised this about being underconnected. We temporarily double the speeds for this. So last fall, they were just increased to 25 megs. Because of COVID-19, we increased those to 50 megs. Again, someone, you, me, we probably have higher speeds than that. The purpose of this program really is to allow kids to do their homework. But we recognize, okay, now there's multiple kids probably online and parents working from home. So sort of going parallel streams there. Yes, we increase the speeds, but also trying to provide some education on, are you doing everything that you can be doing to make sure that your internet is working the best? Do you need to be on Wi-Fi? Do you need to be having streaming what you're watching? Do you need to be, does every call need to be a video call? So providing some of that education, as well as increasing the bandwidth for families. Another big thing that came out of, schools saying, hey, we want to be able to cover the cost of internet for our families. We implemented a temporary school internet payment program, so schools can pay for service for their families. So if you think about that, it seems like, oh great, we want to pay for them, but Cox did not have any sort of solution for that previously. If you are a customer, you have your own account, it's under, a person's name. So just to get that back end was a big haul to be able to say, okay, schools, you can now pay for these hundreds or thousands of family accounts. And another big thing was the ability to pre-qualify families so that it, removes some of the steps. We think the process is pretty simple, but you're still signing up for an account. You still have to, show proof that you're receiving some sort of government assistance, which is how you qualify for our program. But in San Diego, in the last 6 weeks, we had pre-qualified more than 30,000 families, which I think is, it's pretty significant. And again, just speaks to how much of a need there still is and was out there. So let's see, what else can I share? I think that's probably a good place to pause and
Perfect.
see what else we can talk about.
Thank you so much, Paula. You in the not so simple story about how Cox is responding to the moment, I think you've highlighted a number of very important things, including this idea that relationships and trust and networks that already exist are one of the ways that you and many others have been able to respond quickly and do things that you might not otherwise do, perhaps with less red tape around it. And I think that's just so demonstrative of some of the things we talk about at Grantmakers and with our partners all the time, is this idea that we can't go it alone. We need to be in community with our partners, with the people that we serve and others. And it's the value of that really comes to the fore at moments like this. The other thing I want to pose is just a question not to be answered now, but maybe for everyone to think about is, and you started to touch on it, Paula, when you were describing folks who have a housing situation in which they're not the only person in the house. But we also are talking about families and students who are in a lot of different situations. You know, it might be as simple as everybody's in the house together, and so they don't have a quiet corner to study. And it might be so complex as a situation where they're dealing with some form of homelessness, so they don't have a home to be hooked up to the internet. And I know there have been a number of solutions coming forward for that, but I'd love to explore how do we dig deep into the folks who at all times are most vulnerable, but in this are at danger of falling either further behind. But before we do that collectively and directly, I really want to bring Sarah Jacobs into the conversation. Sarah is with San Diego. Oh my gosh.
For Every Child.
Thank you. I was like, kids for everyone? That's not right. I mean, sure, if you want them.
Why not?
San Diego for Every Child. To talk about the work that they've been doing, which is far-reaching, but in this particular moment, we're happy to welcome you and thank you for talking about this issue.
Well, thank you. And it's so nice to be on the call. And I'm so inspired by all of the work we've already heard about. So San Diego for Every Child, in our initial conversations with school districts, with many of you on the phone, we identified 3 key priority areas for kids during this time, which were food security, childcare needs, and equitable distance learning. And as we were working on the other 2, we were consistently hearing from families about the need for connectivity, about the underconnected and not just non-connected groups, and how difficult this distance learning has been for some families. And so we're really excited to be teaming up with the Classrooms of the Future Foundation to support the County Office of Education in really figuring out how to create both a near-term and long-term strategy for equitable distance learning. So we've had our first pre-call. We will be setting up the task force soon, but basically it is bringing together school districts, philanthropy, corporations, community organizations, representatives of families, etc., to make sure that we're all working together and have a common strategy and common plan. And a lot of the inspiration and model for this has actually come from the Emergency Child Care Task Force that we are proud to be part of in the childcare and early learning space, which I know a lot of you on the call are a part of. And we felt like that model was really successful to make sure that we were all pulling in the same direction. And also it enabled us to mobilize more funding because there was a central location that we could direct state funding, county funding, et cetera, to. So the first initial priority is going to be a countywide assets and needs assessment, particularly regarding connectivity and devices, especially looking at where we can utilize the amazing programs that Cox has put in place and where we might need something like hotspots or other alternative connectivity models. And we are going to have a specific subcommittee on the rural and remote challenges and have tribal representation on the task force as well, because we know that there are unique challenges there in terms of how we can get connectivity to some of those really remote students. But one of the things we felt really strongly about was that while we needed to focus on the near term in 3 months and make sure that we are addressing those immediate challenges, that in order to have a real equity lens around this, we need to also make sure we're taking into account the intermediate and longer term considerations. And so we also have a subcommittee that's going to focus on that and really think about how we can help parents with digital literacy skills, how we can make sure that as we're getting connectivity and devices, we're not thinking that that's sufficient, but looking really holistically at what we need to do on this equitable learning piece. And especially thinking about, you know, a lot of the programs that we've seen are amazing, but they will eventually have some end date when Cox, you'll stop being able to pay for many students free and reduced price connectivity. And so what does a long-term strategy look like, especially as we look into, you know, the near term of a more blended learning situation where it will be a while before you're actually having kids in the classroom full time like we used to. And we're really excited that we have partners at the international level with UNICEF and others who are really focused on thinking about how you finance some of those longer term pieces and what that could look like. And so I think as we move towards that, that'll be hopefully an innovative thing we can do here in San Diego that informs what other folks around the world are looking at.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sarah. Gosh, you all are just so knowledgeable and clearly dedicated and raise such good points that are just melding in my head. And this is a complex problem, and being able to address the needs now. There's been some really good chatter in the chat box thinking about when we go back to some version of schooling in classrooms that is likely to be phased, likely to be blended, as you said, Sarah, and how that will all play out. And also just want to reflect on conversations that are happening all around that say, let's not aim for going back to what we had before, but rather let's aim for going back to something that's better for everyone, particularly the folks who are traditionally and currently shut out of the advantages that we have. And you mentioned tribal representation, Sarah, which is just so wonderful because we are in the Kumeyaay territory, and we do have 18 tribes in this region who are living here today. And you know, they have their own governments, but they continue to suffer from any number of challenges and isolations while also having their own solutions. And so how are we including them and making sure that what they need to move forward with education that's meaningful is respected and supported? And I'll just mention, since I have the microphone and can, that there's Kumeyaay Community College. There's an actual community college on Cuyamaca Community College property that is certified school, and they no doubt are thinking about this right now and how they continue to advance and preserve their culture and heritage with all the same challenges that we're facing for our kindergarten to college students in the mainstream schools. So with that, I want to open it up to discussions, and I can definitely bring some of the questions that have been in the chat box, maybe spend 10 minutes just having conversation. But before I do that, I just wanted to invite anybody, Patrick, Paula, Sarah, Shuri, if there was anything you heard from your colleagues that you wanted to comment on or respond to.
Yeah, in our conversation with the state of California on Monday, one of the things we were informed about is the executive order to ensure that all foster kids are connected. And the dialogue was about putting priority for state computers that those of us receive for state computers on the most vulnerable. And that is, you know, the foster kids, the kids aging out of foster that may be trying to go on to college. And I know that Computers to Kids and Cox has worked on initiatives like that in the past. We've also partnered with the Lucky Duck Foundation and worked with some of the transitional youth homeless agencies here in San Diego. So I know that on a state level, something that's really important to ensure that those families don't get, or those students don't get neglected.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for sharing that. maybe not talking like going too far into detail, but there was a question, and Patrick, thank you for answering it and providing a link, which we'll share with everybody in the chat box, but about that question of reopening. Can you just give that big picture for folks so we know a little bit what guidance is being shared as of now, given the situation that we know?
Sure. So in the chat box, I know that as the state and as cities and communities are starting their reopening process, and I know that they're approaching it in phases. Part of the guidance that we've been giving our districts is to make sure that they don't, just haphazardly open without taking into consideration all the things that need to be put in place first to ensure the safety of kids. And so that more than anything is really the primary concern, is making sure that our kids are safe in schools, on campus, and that parents feel really comfortable sending their kids to school. And if they do feel comfortable sending their kids to school, that they feel comfortable knowing that their kids are going to be social distance from others, and then that there are also alternative plans that are put in place when it comes to distance learning. There's packet work that's happening. There's staggered schedules. So there are a number of challenges that we want to make sure that school districts put really their foresight and their proactive thought process around. And we know that we have fantastic leaders across our county, so we want to make sure that they're putting all of those plans into place. So yeah. I don't know if that helps shed some light in terms of what we've been doing and the guidance that we're providing. It's just, I think it goes back to that graphic that I shared with you earlier. Really, the risks and challenges is not just digital connectivity, but it's really around health, infection. It's around the unemployment, income loss that some of our families are going to experience, food insecurity, housing insecurity, childcare, all the social emotional well-being. So I think it's important that, in the same way that, our county and our cities and all of our organizations are approaching, employees coming back to work, we want to approach that same way with students coming back to school.
Wonderful, thank you. And I will share a slide at the end with some information about one way that we're trying to track where the support is going, because you're right, is that I think really transparency and sharing and communicating is one of the ways we're going to address this challenge, because making sure someone has food is great, making sure someone has a computer is great, but it's really a very holistic issue. This is about the intersection of people's lives and their environment. So for folks who are interested in getting more involved, Sarah, in this sort of future-focused conversation, are there ways for them to connect into the conversations that will be hosted soon?
Absolutely. So we would love to have anyone who's interested join. The task force itself is planning on a cadence of 2 meetings a week to start really building that rapport and communication with subcommittee meetings. But we can definitely have, a component for funders where you don't have to be in every meeting, and we can make sure we're keeping you in the loop. And we're really, focused on being action oriented. So this is going to move really quickly. I'll put my email address in the chat so that anyone who's interested can reach out. We can definitely get you looped in. And the other thing I'll just add to Patrick's point about reopening, one of the things that San Diego for Every Child is really encouraging people to think about is as schools are not going to be opening in the traditional sense, that we still need to be thinking about childcare and who is watching kids and how, and that we need to make sure that we're not asking parents to go back to work without any plan for who's going to be watching their kids.
Great, thank you. Thank you for sharing your contact info in the chat, and we will send that in the follow-up email as well so that everybody has it, whether you're capturing it for the chat or not. There's some questions about going back to that topic of sort of kids in alternative educational settings. So kids who are system involved, foster youth, you spoke about, Cherie, kids in juvenile justice, kids at, for example, Monarch School, who rely on that building for many things, including most likely their technology. Is there anything in particular that you want to share about that? I assume, Patrick, you're the best suited, but anybody, certainly. in terms of, are we meeting those needs, or like where are we falling short? What are the solutions? Could we be doing more of something but for time, volunteers, funding, what have you?
I'm going to say all of the above. I think, the call to action is to reach out to, the Monarch Project, reach out to some of the local schools, and find out ways that we can help contribute, whether it's funding, whether it's time, whether it's your expertise. I think that's critical. I think we all need to, rally behind, just making sure that, again, kids are safe, that they are provided with as many resources and basic needs as possible. And I think that it's a constant challenge, and we just want to make sure that we're trying to address as much as we can. It's an ongoing process for us.
Great, thank you. And I know the County Office of Ed has quite a bit of data, survey results, that sort of thing. And so for anybody who is interested in figuring out how you can be of help, how the needs might match with your focus and mission, whether you are working directly in community or providing resources to those who are, I really encourage you to check the website, reach out, and we can help make sure that connection happens so that we're all coordinating around accurate information to help folks. So I think that we're probably, yeah, Paula.
Can I just, so Shuri talked about this a little bit, but I think it's important to say again, especially as companies are looking, I know we've got employees saying, hey, how can we help? How can we help? What can we do? And, for example, us, we're being very cautious because we're saying, no, we're under this shelter in place order, so we don't want any employees out in the community, but there are things that you can do, like connecting. Maybe it's the IT person, or maybe it's your, if there's somebody who works on sustainability in your office, with Computers to Kids to donate devices, or, looking at different things that can be done virtually, because there are needs. To Patrick's point, I'm sure it's so complicated. And I know we're talking with districts all the time, and, districts that you wouldn't necessarily think. San Ysidro, they have 1,100 homeless kids. I mean, it's not just the Monarchs of the world, but it's everywhere. East County, they have, pockets of families that live in rural areas that cannot access Cox. And I didn't mention this, but, yes, there's Cox, but AT&T has their own similar program. Spectrum has their own program. So we are sort of all working together in that sense, but
Thank you.
There's a lot that can be done.
Thank you so much. Sure, you want to have a closing remark?
Yeah, this is the time, everyone is associated with a company of one type or another. This is the time to go to your company and say, hey, we can give back, not necessarily cash, but every piece of electronic that we recycle through our company needs to come to Computers to Kids. We will refurbish these computers and get them back out into the students' homes, working with the County Office of Education and working with the schools.
That's great. And is it something you do that to take donations of hardware from individuals?
We take electronics, any electronics, working or non-working, except for major appliance, from companies and individuals. And they can drive right up at the back. They don't even have to get out of the car. We'll take care of it. And then everything that we take in gets sanitized for information under DoD standards. But also, because of COVID-19, the metal parts get sanitized before we distribute them back out, to make sure that they're clean and sterile before they go into a home of a family.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think that's so critical for folks to know, especially in this day when we have conversations about what is the level of invasiveness of technology in our homes. People have legitimate concerns about having cameras in their homes, let alone on streetlights. If you want to just Google that and read up on City of San Diego issues. But it's really important to know that the process you have in place is protecting folks' health and well-being from all aspects. So with that, I think we've reached the conclusion, unless anybody has any last words, or if anybody on the line had a last question, just activate your video and go for it. But otherwise, I want to thank just so much all of you for joining us today to participate in this conversation, for asking questions and making comments, to our speakers for bringing your tremendous knowledge, especially as we know that you're working long and intense days to provide the services and attention that you're describing here today. So your time is very much appreciated, as is your work, and we hope to stay in touch to address this issue, which will be so critical to the future, not just today, but we're talking about years and decades of our future, because this is about who we are as a people and who our children and students have the opportunity to become. So thank you. Remember those deep breaths and shoulder relaxations, and we'll get back out there together for our community. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.